The whispers didn't wait until he died. They started early, low and creeping, like the kind of stories servants only tell in hushed voices after midnight. And over the years, those whispers grew louder, curling through the marble halls of the palace until even the walls seemed to listen. The name Ferdinand, once shouted from balconies and embroidered into banners, turned into something people barely dared to speak. By the time he passed, Madrid wasn't mourning. The city was holding its breath. Something was off. It wasn't sadness in the air. It was dread. Thick, suffocating dread. Even the court didn't know how to act. They weren't preparing to honor a fallen king. They were walking on eggshells, terrified of what came next. The church bells rang out of obligation, not grief. Market stalls stayed open, but the noise was subdued. Like the city itself was whispering. Servants tiptoed through the palace halls, refusing to make eye contact. Rumors had already spread that his body had to be hidden from view. Even the undertakers hesitated, whispering prayers as they approached. Mourning clothes were worn, but no tears were shed, because deep down, everyone knew. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something darker. And what came next? Well, no one really talks about it. Not in the open. The Queen Regent, Maria Cristina, stood there, trembling, in a room that felt colder than death. Her eyes were red, her voice barely above a whisper. "His legacy must be preserved," she said, but not like a statue or a painting. She wasn't talking about history books or golden plaques. She meant something else, something darker. That legacy? It was lying right there under the royal bedsheets. And it wasn't a crown. See, Ferdinand VII ruled with fear, paranoia, and cruelty. That much everyone knows, but what people never talk about, the part that never made it into school books, is what really defined him. What lay beneath those sheets? The secret that drove queens to silence and physicians to madness. The reason palace maids refused to enter his chambers alone. Behind closed doors, rumors twisted into legends. Some said he was cursed by the devil. Others swore his condition was punishment for the sins of his ancestors. It wasn't just physical, it was symbolic, a grotesque manifestation of everything rotten in the monarchy. Even the paintings in the hall seemed to avert their gaze when he passed. One royal guard reportedly quit on the spot after an accidental glimpse. The palace staff had a nickname for it, but no one dared speak it out loud. And behind all the pomp, Ferdinand clung to his deformity like a talisman, convinced it proved his divine uniqueness. But to everyone else, it was a ticking bomb, one that had already blown apart every life it touched. It wasn't just his policies that ruined lives, it was his body. He came from a line of royals that had been marrying cousins for so long, they'd practically turned genetics into a gamble. The Habsburgs, the Bourbons, names that used to mean power. By Ferdinand's time, they meant deformity, disease, and deep dysfunction. And Ferdinand? He got the worst of it, born with a physical anomaly that defied explanation. An appendage, let's just say one that most would rather not imagine, so grotesquely large and misshapen, it became both his greatest shame and weirdly his twisted source of pride. It wasn't just oversized, it was unnatural. A shape so bizarre that even the most seasoned palace doctors were left speechless. Whispers told of one physician who fainted the moment he laid eyes on it. Some believed it was a divine punishment. Others swore it had magical properties, though none would dare test that theory. It was said to throb when he got angry, as though his body and mind were wired by some cruel force. Tailors had to redesign his royal trousers multiple times just to keep the abnormality hidden from public view. He demanded special chairs, special cushions, even custom beds, none of which ever brought him real comfort. Artists were forbidden from sketching him in the nude, and those who tried to document his condition mysteriously vanished. There were nights he would scream alone in his chambers, not from pain, but from the fury of knowing he could never escape it. In private, he talked to it like it was a separate being, his shadow twin, as one servant overheard. And while the world bowed to his crown, Ferdinand knew that the true throne, his real cursed burden, was the thing beneath his robes. He tried everything to fix it. Quacks, potions, secret surgeries, experimental devices. Nothing worked, but instead of confronting the truth, he turned that shame into obsession. and every woman who entered his bed paid the price. His first wife, Maria Antonia, was just a teenager when she married him. Young, hopeful, completely unprepared for what she was about to face. Her screams on their wedding night, everyone heard them. Servants froze. Guards looked away. She called him a monster, and she meant it. That night broke her, and the nights that followed, they weren't about love, they were about duty, about rituals meant to force an heir into existence. Strange cushions, oils, medical tools crafted by desperate physicians, all designed to accommodate the king's abnormality. None of it worked. And Maria Antonia? She slipped into a spiral of pain and fear until there was nothing left of her but a shadow. She stopped smiling, stopped eating. Her maids would find her curled in corners, whispering prayers to saints no one had spoken to in years. Some nights, the palace guards reported hearing her cries echo through the stone walls, soft at first, then rising into something closer to animal howls. The queen's chambers started to feel like a crypt, with curtains drawn tight and mirrors covered as if mourning something still alive. At court, she became a ghost in fine gowns, drifting through banquets with a vacant stare. Doctors prescribed tonics. Priests offered exorcisms. Nothing helped. Her family back home sent desperate letters, but Ferdinand burned them before she could read a single word. One servant claimed she tried to run barefoot in the rain before collapsing at the palace gates. They brought her back in silence, and from that point on, she didn't speak much at all. She became the silent proof of a royal nightmare no one dared name. Even the palace dogs, once loyal to her scent, began to whimper and hide when she entered a room. Her perfume changed, no longer floral, but heavy and bitter, like old incense. Some nights she'd sit by the window for hours, just staring into the blackness like she was waiting for it to swallow her whole. Her hair thinned, her skin grew pale, translucent. The sparkle of the crown on her head felt like a cruel joke, mocking her descent. Candles in her room were left to burn all night, as if she feared what the dark might whisper. Musicians stopped playing when she appeared, not out of respect, but out of discomfort. And one day, a visiting ambassador said it aloud. "That is not a queen. That is a spirit in a cage." Then came wife number 2, Maria Isabel. Same story, different name. This time, the court was already tense, already bracing, and yet no one could save her from what was coming. She didn't scream. She went quiet. So quiet that people started to whisper she was more ghost than queen. The look in her eyes said it all. Haunted, vacant, like someone trapped in a nightmare that never ended. And still, the kingdom hoped for an heir. Finally, Maria Cristina stepped into the role. She had no idea she was walking into a curse. She wasn't just marrying a king, she was inheriting every terrible piece of baggage he carried. After Ferdinand died, people thought maybe the nightmare would end. Spoiler, it didn't. His presence lingered. His spies still worked the halls. His doctors, well, they had one more job: preserve the legacy, literally, not in ink or art, but in flesh. The grotesque deformity that had defined his reign, they preserved it, as if it were some holy artifact instead of the twisted source of decades of suffering. Maria Cristina, now Queen Regent, wasn't ruling a country. She was walking through a haunted house. Every decision she made, every breath she took, it all felt like it had Ferdinand's eyes on it. And when the physicians came to her asking to prepare the royal bedchamber once again, for her, she knew exactly what that meant. There was no escape. The bed, the machines, the same tools used on the women before her, now waiting for her. Her body, her mind, her spirit, none of it was truly hers anymore. The monarchy didn't see her as a person. They saw her as a solution, a vessel. One more chance to produce an heir, no matter the cost. The room was cold not from temperature, but from memory. The walls seemed to hum with the ghost of screams past. Every object in that chamber, every strap, every lever, every polished metal edge, carried the scent of fear. Her pulse raced every time the door creaked open, unsure whether it was a physician or a predator. She wasn't asked for consent, just told what must be done in the name of the crown. Nurses avoided her gaze as if seeing her pain might make it real. Her nights bled into mornings, soaked in silence and candlelight. Her prayers grew shorter, not from faith, but from resignation. And in those long hours before dawn, she realized this wasn't just about legacy. This was a ritual of sacrifice. And she was the offering. And so the cycle repeated. Behind the palace walls, Maria Cristina played her part, dressed in royal gowns, sat on thrones, smiled for portraits. But inside, she was unraveling. The strain, the fear, the quiet horror of what was expected of her. Every day chipped away at the woman she used to be. The public never saw it, but the courtiers did. The servants, the ones who passed her in the halls and saw how her eyes didn't shine anymore. She was slipping away, just like the queens before her, just like the monarchy itself. Ferdinand may have died, but he took Spain with him in a way no war or revolution ever could. His deformity wasn't just a personal burden. It was a symbol, a grotesque emblem of a bloodline poisoned by incest, secrets, and power hoarding. That oversized, distorted part of his body wasn't just some freak biological quirk. It was the perfect metaphor for everything that had gone wrong with the Spanish crown. Even in death, Ferdinand still ruled, through fear, through whispers, through the twisted relic stored away like some cursed crown jewel. The monarchy crumbled from the inside out. It wasn't the rebellions or the economic collapse that did the most damage. It was the silence, the lies, the women destroyed by one man's refusal to admit that his curse wasn't a symbol of power. It was a curse. The doctors, still obsessed, kept their notes, sketches, detailed reports, not because they cared about healing, but because they couldn't look away. It was horror and fascination wrapped together, the relic of a reign that had turned grotesque. And what about Maria Cristina? She stayed, she endured, but not without scars. Her sanity, her hope, her sense of self, all broken by the weight of that legacy. She'd come in with a heart full of hope and left as little more than a shadow. That palace didn't need ghosts, it had plenty of the living kind. Time moved on, faces changed, but that whisper, that chill, it stayed. Because some stories don't fade, some kings aren't remembered for their victories or their palaces or their coins. Some kings are remembered for what they tried so desperately to hide. And Ferdinand VII? He left behind more than a crumbling empire. He left behind a legacy soaked in shame, terror, and silence. If this chilling journey through one of history's most disturbing royal legacies left you speechless, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think Spain should have done with this dark secret? There are more untold corners of history waiting to be uncovered, and your support helps bring them to light. Stay curious and stay brave.